bow down. Son of God, you are the one. You are the one. You are the love that frees us. You are the light that leads us. Like a fire burning. Son of God, you are the one. You are the one. We're living for. Sing, 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 and make music with the heavens. We will sing, sing, sing. Grateful that you hear us when we shout your praise. Lift high the name of Jesus. What's not to love about you? Heaven and earth adore you. Then kingdoms bow down. Son of God, you are the one. You are the one. We're living for. King, sing, sing, and make music with the heavens. We will sing, sing, sing. Grateful that you hear us when we shout your praise. Lift high the name of Jesus. Sing, 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 and make music with the heavens. We will sing, sing, sing. Grateful that you hear us when we shout your praise. Lift high the name. Sing, 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 and make music with the heavens. We will sing, sing, sing. Grateful that you hear us when we shout your praise. Lift high the name of Jesus.
Welcome. Good morning to Muskogee Community Church. My name is Adam, and I'm the new intern here for the summer. Thanks, man. Glad to be here. I'm at Muskogee Community Church. We're a community of faith made up of men, women, and children, all at different points in our spiritual journey, and we celebrate that here. We meet every Sunday to recenter our lives on Jesus and the good news that he brings. This then empowers us to go out and share that good news with others. This morning, we'll be singing some more songs and listening to a sermon by Jeremy and Peter. Following all of that, there'll be a little send-off for Jeremy as he goes off on a sabbatical. I'm excited for him to go. I'm excited for him to go, so it's a little mixed feelings here, but it's good. Before starting all this stuff, I have a few announcements to make. And for all these announcements, you guys can go to the website, and you can sign up for the online newsletter that has them all every single week. It'll be great. And also there, you can sign up. You can go on the feedback sheet and just say who you are, how you found out about us, and we'll appreciate that. And right now, I have Rachel here, who wants to come up and talk a little bit about updates in Adventureland.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry. I'm just out of breath because we have a mud run going on in the back right now. So for all of you that have to sit here, sorry. Okay, I just want to let you know that the kids are having a great time. Now, there's not many kids here, so if you're in here and you're sitting here and you're a child, 0 to 99, come back there and we're going to have a fun day. So, I just want you to know something. This is incredible fact, and I don't know if any of you knew this, but we, on a Sunday morning, only have like probably average 40 hours a year with your kids. Like, that's not very many hours, right? To be able to talk with the kids, to get them to know all about Jesus. And so the great news is you guys have like 30,000 hours in a year to be able to talk to your kids about God and Jesus and a relationship with them. So this is where this great, incredible partnership comes in, where we're all in this together, right? Right? Right. Okay, amen. So awesome. So for June, we have a lot going on. So we do themes in Adventureland, as you can tell. I didn't just maybe I woke up like this, who knows? And next month is all about Power Up. Now, you know what's so cool about that? Is I don't know about your kids, but my kids speak only in video game language, which I'm trying, but I have no idea what they're saying. So that's the language that we're going to talk about in June, so your kids are going to totally understand what we're saying and what we're talking about. And actually, I'm bringing back like Mario Brothers and Pac-Man. They may not know those ones. I think they do because it's retro and it's new. I don't know. Anyway, so we're doing stuff like that. So in our nursery, our Caterpillars class, 0 to 2 years old, which they're waiting for those babies, they are going to sing over your baby, they're going to talk over your baby, they're going to pray over your baby, and that's what we want in our nursery. You know what? Dropping them off in our Caterpillar class is so important because our volunteers just get to love on them and get to pray over them and, well, let's face it, give you a little bit of a break. So this month, or in June, we're going to talk about Jesus gives me power to do everything. And let me tell you, those babies, they're pretty smart, and they absorb everything, even 0 to 2 years old, they do. So that's happening in our Caterpillar class. In Butterflies, we are going to talk about, so our memory verse is going to be, I can do everything by the power of Christ. So actually, all of our classrooms is talking about the power of Christ. So it's going to be so exciting and awesome. And then we'll go over the stories and stuff throughout the month so that they can kind of relate that to the power of Christ. And then in our Bears and Moose class, our memory verse for that month is going to be, the fruit the Holy Spirit produces is, anyone want to sing it? Love, joy. I should have had you bring your ukulele.
Patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control.
He will go on and on and on. So basically, something like that. So it's love, joy, and peace. It is being patient, kind, and good. It is being faithful and gentle and having control of oneself. So that's that. And then we're going to have the Life app, because this month is all about perseverance. Let me tell you that obstacle course is pretty tough. Mickey did it this morning. Whoa, give her a round of applause. But she did it. So if she can do it, anybody else can do it, right? All of us can do it. I didn't mean anything by that. I just meant we all can do it. I love you. I didn't even, never mind. Okay, so also June 23rd, really important date to keep in mind, it's our graduation. So what that means is if you have a 2-year-old who's in our Caterpillar class who's going to be like 3 and like between now and December, they get to go into our Butterfly class. And if you have a 5-year-old or someone who's going into grade 1 in September, they move up to our Bears class. And then if you have a bear who's 1 to 3, if they're going into grade 4, they're going to be into our Moose class. And then if they're in grade 5 and they're going into grade 6, they're going to graduate completely out of Adventureland. But you know what's so cool? We have a 6 to 8 class for them now. So they get to move into the next class. So just, June 23rd, keep that on your date because that's going to be really important. Yes, and so, sorry, I didn't know if you were asking me a question. Anyway, I think that's all I have because I'm taking up too much time. Thank you so much. Keep praying for us. And I would like to just put a prayer request out there. We have our Bears and Moose class together, grades 1 to 5, but we really need to have our grades 4 and 5, our Moose class, have their own class and classroom, extra portable, right? So they don't even know I'm going to say this. I'm just putting that out there because it's really important that we really speak to them as preteens in their language and at their level. And sometimes it's difficult when you have grade 1 and grade 5 together. So if you guys can keep praying about that with me, that would be great. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rachel. Lots of fun stuff going on in Adventureland. A few more announcements we have. Today we have a youth program for Students that are grade 9 to 12, back to those doors right there. There's a little room past the prayer room. They have a little class today to give you opportunity to learn about God and for them to connect and grow together. And that'll be happening when Jeremy and Peter come up to start their sermon. Also, next Sunday, there's going to be a potluck after church, which is always fun, a lot of food. So everyone, you're encouraged to come. Just bring a dish to share with everybody else. There'll be plenty of food. So just come on out and just have some fun with everybody around. Get to know some more people in the community and just get to have a good time together. We also, on the idea of connections, have this thing called a mystery dinner, where either on the 8th or the 9th of June, depending on availability, there will be a dinner of basically how it goes is you sign up on the website saying, I would like to do this dinner or I would like to host this dinner, and then you'll be getting an email, I'm assuming, some kind of communication that is then saying either what house to go to or who you're hosting, depending on what you sign up for, and you have no other information than that, and you just know you're eating food. So it'll be a great opportunity to go in this group that you don't know who is there and just like meet whoever is there and have a good meal. It's an easy thing to do. Talking over food is one of the easiest things. So it's a great way to naturally go into community with each other, naturally have conversations. It'll just be a fun time there. And another way that we worship here at MCC is through offering. We have, if you feel like you're financially led today to give, there are a few ways to do so. You can either go to the website for information on how to give online, give by text message, or set up automatic giving through the website. Or if you want to give in person, there's also an offering box in the back. Those are all the announcements that I have, but I'd like to invite Jeremy up for a few more announcements. Do you want this or do you want to just use this?
So you might wonder, where does that money go that you put into the offering box or that you give online? And yesterday, I'm proud and excited to announce that we spent $3,000 as a church, some of the best money I think we've ever spent, because we invested that in the volunteers who really make everything happen here. See, Peter and I, and I guess Adam for a little bit, are the only paid staff at MCC, and everything else that happens through volunteers. And so these volunteers are just passionate about the mission of the church and are willing to give their own free time week after week, including to give up a weekend to go to a volunteer training conference that Faith Baptist put on this past week. So we were happy as a church to cover most of the cost for that, and we sent 30 volunteers to this conference yesterday, the biggest showing of any church besides Faith Baptist Church at this conference. So I think we can all be proud of the fact that these people gave of their own money to be there, gave of their own time, and really invest the emotional effort in our mission to help people connect with God and become disciples of Jesus. And so I'm just excited about that. I wanted to share that with you. The theme was to equip the people in the church to do the ministry of the church, because that's how the Bible says that the church is supposed to work. My job as a pastor and Peter's job as a pastor is to equip other people to do the real work, that we're there to enable you guys to do ministry. So what a great opportunity. And I want to say thank you to every person who took their weekend to give that time to invest in our church. So thank you to all the volunteers who were there, to all the volunteers who serve all the time, and thank you especially to my wife April, who coordinated the thing and became the point person and invited us all to go on that. So thank you, April, for organizing that. So I also wanted to introduce a new volunteer, but is Emma here? Emma's not here. She was there yesterday, though, so maybe she gets a free pass. So maybe it's not the best time to announce the fact that she's coming on as our generosity team leader, but I've already got it all printed out here. So Emma Platts-Boyle is taking over this important team in the church, leading it. We have a 4-part mission at MCC to help people experience God in a daily relationship, to help them follow Jesus in sacrificial obedience, to help them love each other in authentic community, and to help them serve the world in faithful stewardship. And what that means is that we as a church don't think that we're just here for the good of our own people or to do what happens in these four walls, but we're here to serve our community. And that team is the team that's entrusted with that part of our mission, to figure out how we can spend our money and spend our time to meet needs here in Muskoka and Almaguin and around the world. And so Barb McQuillan's been leading that team for a while, and she's recently stepped down. Emma's stepping into her shoes. And the first thing Emma is wanting to do is bring together a team of people who are passionate about things like missions, service projects, helping those in need, poverty reduction, just finding ways to enable our church to serve our community. So if you're interested in becoming a part of that team, talk to her, and she'll be here next week for sure. So, no, anyway, if you don't know Emma, talk to Peter. Peter will get you connected. It would be great to have a strong, healthy team supporting her in that role. So, without further ado, I want to pray and hand it over to Charles and our worship team for today. God, we've all come in here from different places, different weeks. For some of us, it's been a struggle, and it's all we could do to drag ourselves here this morning. For some of us, it's been a joyful and fun week, and we're just here ready to praise you. I pray you would meet each of us right where we are. We offer you this time as a time where we are reaching out to you with our hearts and our minds, with our ears open to what you want to say to us, and with the knowledge that we're in this thing together, that you've called us together as a church, where every person is important, every person belongs. So as we sing these songs to you, God, meet us in our time of worship. May we engage not just with our voices, but our hearts as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Please stand.
No, I'd like you to just stay sitting for a moment here. As Jerry mentioned there, I'm Charles, and I have the great honor of leading this band today. And we have decided to name this band. We just came up with this morning. It's we're going to call ourselves, this is serious, the Young Guns and the Rolling Bones. All right, so you guys are probably looking forward to our first CD and that, but yeah. What I would like you guys to do is just forget the people around you and just set your internal eyes on God as I read some scripture. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. Whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together, and he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him and through him, to reconcile to himself all things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. We'd like you to stand up and join us as we worship this great and glorious God.
Lord my God, in you I put my trust. Oh Lord my God, in you I put my hope. Oh Lord my God, in you I put my trust. Oh Lord my God, in you I put my hope. I find my peace in you be bounded by my faith in you. Lift up holy hands and sing. Let the praises ring. Let the praises ring. Oh Lord my God, to you I give my hands. Oh Lord my God, to you I give my hope. Oh Lord my God, to you I give my everything. Oh Lord my God, to you I give my life. In you I find my peace. In you I find my strength. In you I live and move and breathe. Let everything I say and do be found by my faith in you. Lift up holy hands and sing. Let the praises ring. Let the praises ring. What you begin, our provision through the desert, you see it through to the end. You see it through to the end. The Lord our God is ever faithful, changing through the ages. From this darkness you will lead us, and forever we will say, you're the Lord our God. without you. We won't move without you. You're the light of all and all that we need. We won't move without you. We won't move without you. You're the light of all and all that we need. We won't move without you. We won't move without you. You're the light of all and all that we need. We won't move without you. We won't move without you. You're the light of all and all that we need. Lord, our God is ever faithful, never changing through the ages. From this darkness, you will lead us, and forever we will sing. You're the Lord our God, and forever we will sing. You're the Lord our God, and forever we will sing. You're the Lord our God. Who am I that the highest King would welcome you? I was lost, but He brought me. Oh, His love for me. Oh, His love for me. Whom the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, He has ransomed me. Oh, His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. Whom the Son sets free, how is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. longing just to bring something that's a word that will bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the things I've made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. King of endless worth, no one could express how much you deserve. Though we can pour, all I have is yours, every single breath. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You reach much deeper than this, the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the things I've made it. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the things I've made it. When it's all about you, it's all about you, Jesus. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus.
Lord, help us to turn our hearts away from our own selves, from our own dreams and desires and wants and needs. And help us by your own great power to set those aside and keep our eyes straight on you and find our rest and our inner fulfillment in you and in you alone. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Morning, everybody. Morning. We're doing it again. Team teach.
Yeah. You said you liked it last time, but it's a lot of work.
It is a bit of work, yeah.
So, but Today, as many of you know, is my last Sunday before I go on sabbatical for 3 months. And so that makes this kind of a special Sunday. And we thought that together, I'm going to get closer to you here.
Okay.
Together, we would talk about what it is, why it's happening, and how I'm going to use it, things like that, what the church is going to do in the meantime. So that's kind of where we're going with this. But the whole idea of sabbatical is actually rooted in a biblical concept called Sabbath. So sabbatical comes from that word Sabbath. And so today, before we get to anything about sabbatical, I want to talk about what Sabbath means. It was a very important practice in the Old Testament. It was the command that every Saturday, the seventh day, not Sunday like what we practice it as Christians, but the Saturday, the Sabbath day, was to be a day of rest. It was very important. It was one of the 10 commandments. Maybe the 10th commandment most often broken. I don't know. What do you think the punishment was in the Old Testament for breaking the Sabbath or desecrating the Sabbath? Death. Yeah, death. Yeah, so it was a very minor side command. No, it wasn't. It was a serious part of Israel's practice. I don't know why it was death. I mean, I guess it was like, if you're not going to take a day off, I guess you get the rest of your life off. So, but it was a very serious thing that I don't think we always give enough attention to today. And so I want to explore the concept, what's behind it, with a view to learning the principles and applying them in our own lives, not just with the idea of sabbatical, but with your lives and the life of our church in mind as well. I want to start by reading from Exodus 31, verses 16 to 17, which is a passage where this command to practice Sabbath is reiterated. And I have written that passage. Oh, no, I've just turned to Genesis 31. I was like, that does not look right. But Exodus 31 says, "The Israelites are to observe the Sabbath, celebrating it for the generations to come as a lasting covenant," so an agreement between God and them. "It will be a sign between me and the Israelites forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he rested and was refreshed." So, many times when the Sabbath is talked about in the Old Testament, it's tied into the creation account. This idea that God made the world and that when he was done, he rested. Now, that's a funny thing because we learn through the rest of the Bible that God doesn't need rest. He doesn't grow tired or weary. He is a boundless source of energy, even more so than a 2-year-old child. And God doesn't need to rest. So why on earth did he get to the end of creation and go, whew, I need a day off? It was to teach us, right? It was to set an example for us and to work into the very fabric of the universe this principle of work and rest. And we see it in the way that nature works. We see it in the way too long rest of winter where everything goes ample from the beginning. Now, in that passage, there are 2 words that I want to point out, and they're the words rest. He rested and was refreshed. Okay? So that's like the original R&R. He rested and he was refreshed. Now, again, that doesn't mean that God was tired, but that he set an example for us of resting and refreshment. And what I think is really interesting is when you dig into the words there, the Hebrew words, there's some very significant meanings. So the word for rest is actually the word, is it Shabbath, I think? Mm-hmm. Yes, Shabbath. I would write it in Hebrew, but I don't know Hebrew. That's why we stick to the Greek when I want to be impressive. Shabbath means to stop. You were doing something and you stop it or you cease. That's literally what the word means. Probably fairly obvious. It's where the word Sabbath comes from, this root word of just stopping something. So the basic most fundamental meaning of this idea of Sabbath is the idea of stopping. And I've talked about that before, actually, here, and we'll talk more about it in a moment. But I like how this word refreshed was added in. What's the Hebrew word for that one? Nafash. You know what? You don't know Hebrew either, so here's the Hebrew writing for those. And the word nafash means to literally breathe. Okay? So Sabbath is about stopping and breathing. And that's the pattern that we're going to look at today. This idea that everything in the universe, including and especially us as human beings, need times where we stop and breathe. And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and as Jeremy was talking about the way that it's seen in nature and the way that it's sort of woven into the fabric of creation, and it was always a part of things, that was definitely true when God chose for himself a people in the Old Testament. He took the Israelite people and he said, you're going to be mine. And right from the get-go, this was a part of how they were supposed to live. We see, as Jeremy mentioned in the 10 Commandments, it made it to number 4, which means it's probably pretty important. That commandment basically just says you can work 6 days, but on the 7th day you must rest. And this commandment to rest from work became something with a lot of, like, an extensive list of things that you couldn't do. It wasn't taken lightly, as he said before. What are some of the things that I'd written here? Well, some of the things we see that when Jesus came that he noticed that were against the laws of the Sabbath were even carrying your mat from place to place. If you remember Jeremy's sermon about carrying the mat, and then people were upset about that. So the idea was, like, you can't even carry your mat. The person who was killed in the Old Testament for this, he was just collecting wood, right? So it was very serious that this was a thing that was a part of God's plan for us. Modern Jews actually still have some very strict laws for Sabbath as well. For example, if you're in Israel now and it's the Shabbat, you can't even drive. You can't flip the lights on or off because that's considered work. You can't cook.
That's considered starting a fire.
That's considered starting a fire?
That's why you can't do that.
Okay. I thought it was completing a circuit was work. That's what I was told.
Maybe not.
But they cook beforehand, right? So there's a lot that they're doing. Some of the other things that are interesting where Sabbath shows up in the life of the Israelites are in the way they farmed. We read in the Old Testament that God told them, you can farm your fields for 6 years, but on the 7th year you need to let them rest, and you can't farm in that year. Another thing that's related to Sabbath that they had in Israelite culture was the year of Jubilee, which is basically 49 years would go on in a normal way, but on the 50th year, people had to return the land that they owned or that they were mortgaging to its original owners. If they had slaves, they had to be set free. And I think oh boy.
Yeah, don't pay any attention to that.
Jeez.
Just ignore it. Nobody else hears it.
Yeah.
On the Sabbath, you just let them scream.
I think you're allowed to rock your baby on the Sabbath. I think that's
But not shake.
but not not shake. Anyway, so in this year of Jubilee, there was elements of Sabbath that were in that, right? It was saying, like, you're toiling and you're working for financial gain and to get ahead in the world, but on this 50th year, I want you to step back and say, just stop all that. Let people be free. Let people just exist as they were. Make sure that everyone's provided for in this moment. And so, yeah.
So, what does it mean to stop? That's the first part we'll look at. And why is it so important? Why was it important for them? Why is it important for us today? Well, I think it's really important when we think about Sabbath to remember who the Israelites had been, that they were a slave nation for generations under the Egyptians. And so these are rules in how to become the people of God, how to escape from slavery, not just the reality of slavery, but the mindset of slavery. And so when God delivered them out of Egypt, he needed to teach them what it meant to be free people. They had never experienced it. Their parents hadn't experienced it. Their grandparents hadn't experienced it. They had been slaves. And to be a slave affects your very identity. Your only value as a slave is what you can produce, what you can accomplish, right? So to be a slave meant that everything about your life was measured by what you could get done. And when you could no longer get anything done, you were useless and you could even be put to death. So your identity is wrapped up in what you can accomplish. Slaves were just property. They were machines. They were subhuman. And you might think, well, if you're a slave, you're going to resist that. But if that's all you've ever known, that's going to be your mindset. And so God actually connects the idea of slavery to the idea of Sabbath. In Deuteronomy 5:15, this is the second offering of the Ten Commandments. This is what he says: remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God brought you out of there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God has commanded you to observe the Sabbath day. So God explicitly connects the fact they were slaves to the fact that they need to practice Sabbath. That is because taking one day off in 7 was this incredible gift of freedom, unlike anything they had ever experienced. For that day, they had the right to just exist without measuring themselves by what they could accomplish or the work that they could do. And so stopping or ceasing for that day was a way of them declaring their freedom as God's people. They used to belong to the Egyptians who worked them and worked them and worked them. And now they belong to God who commanded them to stop, to cease, to not work for one day out of 7. Now, probably, I'm guessing, none of us here have the experience of being a literal slave, okay? But maybe you can relate to the idea of measuring your worth by what you accomplish, by measuring how good a day was, by what you got done in it, by measuring how good a week or month or year is, by how much of that to-do list you got checked off, or how much ahead you got at work, or the successes that you had. Maybe you feel sometimes like you're a slave to this thing, to your phone. Does anybody ever feel that way? And so even though we don't have this experience of actual literal slavery, we as humans still have this temptation to measure our value by what we can accomplish, what we can get done. And when we stop for a day, it's our way of declaring, I don't need to get everything done. That the world actually goes right on without me, even when I'm not accomplishing things, even when I'm not controlling things. That God is actually the one in charge of my life in the world. And so stopping for a day, ceasing, Sabbathing, is a way of saying, I trust you. I trust you enough to go, what I can get done in 6 days is enough. And the 7th, I'm going to learn what it means to just be human. I think too often we forget that we are human beings, that being, that existing, that's enough. That we're innately valuable, dignified because God has made us, and we have the right to exist even if we never accomplish another thing. That our value is not tied to what we get done in a given day or year or month. So often we go into this robotic mode where we think of ourselves not as human beings, but as human doings. Does that make sense? Where identity is tied up with what we do and not with just being. And so Sabbath, stopping, ceasing, letting go of all the ways we normally measure ourselves, the way we measure success, the way we check off our to-do lists. I've heard it called a day free of obligation. When we do that, we return to this idea that we're children of God, that life is a gift to be enjoyed, and that when we stop, the world keeps going.
Yeah, so I found that really interesting when Jeremy was talking to me about that this week, because I don't know if it's something that I've always thought of. What I've thought of is kind of what I want to talk about, which is sort of the second half of what we're talking about when we talk about the need for Sabbath, that breath part. And the idea of breathing, it highlights something else. I want to read from you in Leviticus 25. I think it'll be up on the screen behind me. I'll just read it from there. The Lord said to Moses at Mount Sinai, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you, the land itself must observe a Sabbath to the Lord. For 6 years sow your fields, and for 6 years prune your vineyards and gather their crops. But in the 7th year the land is to have a year of Sabbath rest, a Sabbath to the Lord. Do not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. Do not reap what grows of itself, or harvest the grapes of your unattended vines. The land is to have a year of rest." So I think this passage is something you might not think relates to the idea of like humans practicing Sabbath, right? Because it's about land and it's about fields. But I think it actually reveals a pretty deep principle about something inherent in Sabbath, which is that breathing part, right? If you know anything about farming, has anyone here ever been a farmer for any time? This idea of letting land rest, it's super important. If you don't give a field a time, this isn't so much true now because we dump fertilizer all over our fields. But before that time, if you wouldn't let a field rest, it would run out of nutrients. There are nitrates in the soil, and there's nutrients in the soil that can get used up. And your crops begin to get worse and worse and worse each year until you switch out for a new crop, or better yet, until you just let it rest for at least a year. If you don't do that, something kind of bad happens, which is the crops, they just get worse, and eventually the field doesn't produce much good fruit at all. And I think that principle, though it's about farming here in this verse, it makes sense for our lives too, right? Because I think the same thing can happen to us if we don't give ourselves rest. We can begin to see this decrease in our fruitfulness. We can begin to see this decrease in the life that we have in us, right? If we don't step back and take a chance to breathe. I think, unlike what Jeremy was talking about, there is a little bit of an aspect to Sabbath which relates to productivity. What he said for me was really important because I think that's the only thing we think about sometimes. We think about, I just need to rest so I can go and get more things done. And that's not what it's to be, right? It's what he said as well, that there's this aspect that you need to stop worrying about getting things done at all. But God also knows us, right? And he knows that we need rest to be able to be productive in some ways. Maybe not in an economic sense or in a business productivity, for example, but just in the general ability to function well in life, right? In relationships, in work, in your passions, maybe even in your hobbies. In the same way that if you let a field breathe, it'll function better in the future. We're the same. And I think God knew that, and that's why he's commanded us to rest. That's one of the reasons he's commanded us to rest. I was thinking about an example of this, and maybe the best example that I could think on a small scale is just think about somebody who's on a small scale, are they rested today from last night's sleep? And think about the big difference that you can find between somebody who, say, got just a couple hours and somebody who got 10 hours, right? What's the well-rested person often like? He or she is empathetic. They're not easily agitated, right? They're productive. They're fun. I was also thinking, have you ever run into anybody who's a little over-rested when you're not? That doesn't have much to do with my sermon, but I think that happens to me a lot in the mornings because Kara's a morning person. The moment I open my eyes, she's like, okay, so this is what I've gotten done this morning, and the pancakes are getting cold. I'm ready to eat. I've been hungry for hours, and I'm like, oh, okay. I'm not quite ready for this yet. Anyway, there's a dark side to that too, if you want to call it that. There's the 2-hour night's sleep, right? What does that produce the next day? You're grumpy, you're not empathetic, you don't have the ability to sit with somebody and hear anything because you're ready for them just to get out of your face. You don't have much energy, you don't actually have much productivity, you don't have the ability to have fun and to enjoy that day in a lot of ways. I think the same things that are true for that idea of like rest and what the next day looks like are true on a grander sense, in the sense of life. When it comes to even years, like we're talking about when letting a field rest over the course of years. People can suffer if they don't have the chance to breathe. You can see your passions go away, right? You can lose focus on things, lose hope. It's interesting that rest has so much to do with our health. We're learning this more as we progress with medical research, that people who are well rested have better mental health, they have better spiritual health as well, they have better physical health, and all those things can suffer if somebody's not adequately rested. And that's, of course, talking about over the long term, right? So I think God knew what he was doing when he commanded rest to be such a part of our life. He knew that if we wanted to have health in our relationships, if we wanted to have a capacity to be with people in the right way and to just be the people he created us to be, we would need to step back and we would need to take a chance to breathe. Yeah.
Okay. So stopping and breathing. Stopping being sort of the negative part of Sabbath, what you don't do, and breathing being the positive part of Sabbath, what you do. And so God had very specific practices, like Peter said, for the ancient Israelites, and today Orthodox Jews still practice them very sort of religiously, and like they have very specific things. One of the other things was elevators. So I had read that any sort of electrical switch could produce a spark, which could be lighting a fire, which was expressly forbidden in Scripture. And so they couldn't press the elevator buttons, which would kind of stink if you were on the 22nd floor of an apartment building in New York City or something. And so what they have is Sabbath elevators that just all day go up and down, so you don't have to press the button. And so Jews even today go to great extent to make sure that this is a commandment that they follow. But most of us here are Gentile Christians, not Jewish Christians, and that means we don't have to do that. We get to work 7 days a week. Isn't that wonderful?
It is nice to be able to push those buttons.
Yeah.
I've been on one of those. I've been on one of those elevators in Israel, and not on purpose. I was like, all right, I guess it'll be a while before floor 17.
Yeah. Yeah. So we don't carry over all of the minutia from the Old Testament to the New, because there's a great passage in Acts 15 where they basically said, you know what, we're not going to make the Gentiles who are becoming Christians become Jewish as well. And so we're free from a lot of those little tiny laws and stuff. But I don't think we're free from the principle, and especially because Jesus upheld the Sabbath. Now, they were kind of nitpicking him and what he was doing on the Sabbath, but he didn't say, oh, the Sabbath doesn't count anymore. He just said, stop being so nitpicky. The Sabbath was not made, or man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath for man. I suppose people in newer translations. That in other words, the Sabbath was a gift given to us, something to bring us joy, something that we should accept, but not something that we should feel like we become slaves to. It's to set us free, not to make us slaves again. So how do we, most of us who are Gentile, non-Jewish Christians, not bound by the law, take the principle from this and go, this is how I'm going to practice it in my life? Well, first of all, we need to just recognize that this principle of work and rest, of stopping and breathing, is important. It's something that all of us need to consider. And maybe the most obvious way to practice it is to do what the ancient Israelites did. Take 1 day off in 7, 1 day per week, a 24-hour period, a day free of obligation where we stop our normal things, whether that's work, whether that's housework, whether that's chores, whether that's shopping lists, whatever it is. If you would check it off a checklist and say, I got that done, I accomplished something, to just cease, to stop for a whole day. Now, the ancient Israelites, that went from Friday evening to Saturday evening. The Christians changed that to Sunday because they wanted to also recognize Jesus' resurrection from the dead. Maybe neither Saturday nor Sunday work for you. What might work for you? Maybe you're on a rotating shift. Maybe every week your Sabbath is going to be different. Here's what I can guarantee, that if you decide to take one day off in 7, life will conspire against you. It will take hard work and discipline. It will not come easy, and you will be constantly tempted to go, yeah, that is something I want to do. Wink, wink. That's not an obligation or duty. I feel like that. And you have to resist constantly, because we're so used to getting things done in a day.
Goodness gracious, I want to wash those dishes.
That's right, yeah. Leave them till tomorrow. I know, for some of you, that would really stress you out. But you can learn. So stopping is important. What do you do? But what do you do instead of all that stuff? Now, when I grew up, my parents tried to practice Sabbath. I think they knew it was important. But the message that I got was that it was a day you couldn't have any fun. If you wanted to do it, no. I'm saying it's the opposite. If you feel like you should do it, no. If you want to do it, yes. You want to hang out with some friends? Great. Probably, so I have a rule that we don't plan that ahead of time on Sundays, because it might come up and it feels like an obligation, because I'm tired or something. But you want to hang out with some people? Great. You want to go for a hike? Great. You want to paint a picture? Wonderful. Play some music. Come to church. I hope that church helps you breathe, that it helps you sort of fill yourself. Maybe not in this emotionally amazing way every single Sunday, but maybe it reorients you. Maybe every week there's something that you take away from it. If you like to cook, cook. I cook on Sundays because I like to cook, and April cooks most of the week, and so it's a chance for me to kind of be creative and have fun with it. But if you don't like to cook, eat leftovers, order pizza, go out to eat. Do something that doesn't feel like work, but that feels like it's feeding your soul. If the ancient Israelites could figure out how to do this, and they didn't have crock pots or refrigerators or restaurants, we can figure out how to do it if it's something we value. Now, I think this principle of Sabbath is not just a day in a week, but it goes beyond that to our monthly rhythms, maybe even to our daily rhythms, to our annual rhythms, and to our life rhythms. So taking vacation is a form of Sabbathing, but make sure to leave the stuff behind. Don't drag your work along with you, because God commands us to rest. Every day, you can take a little Sabbath. See, I used to feel kind of guilty for watching TV. I thought, with my Spock brain, that's illogical, right? What a waste of time. Until I realized that, you know what? If I work all the way till I go to bed, I don't sleep very well, because there's something in me that just needs a little downtime before I head up to bed. And so now I see watching an episode with April, just sitting on the couch. Are we building our relationship? No, we're not really talking. We're laughing together at something, but we're Sabbathing. We're just stopping all the things we've done all day and just sitting there. And maybe it is good to just sort of cuddle and laugh together for half an hour before bed. Do things in your daily rhythm that allow you just to stop and breathe for a moment. Do things in your week, do things in your month, do things in your year. And then, of course, do things in your life. Have you ever taken a spiritual retreat where you've gone away to just pray and seek God? I know many of you here have, and I've helped you kind of step out on that, and it's been so valuable. That's the word. And so I just encourage you, don't just stop at like, okay, I got to take a day off, but consider these principles of stopping and breathing, of letting go of everything and doing what's life-giving as something that you can work into your life.
Yeah, I really love like what Jeremy mentioned about what Jesus had said, which is that Sabbath, it's not, man wasn't made for the Sabbath, but Sabbath for man, right? It's a gift, and it's a principle, and it's not about the exact laws, but it's about taking this principle and letting it permeate our lives in whatever way works, and where the function of Sabbath, which is a chance to stop and breathe, happens. So I don't think it has to look, like Jeremy's just said, any specific way. It's just like, is this happening? Are you stopping and breathing? Then good. That's Sabbath, right? So I think I want to talk a little bit about sabbatical, because I think that's exactly what sabbatical is. It's the church looking at the life of their pastor and saying, like, in this context, in the way that people do ministry now, in our world, what does Sabbath, What does good stopping and breathing look like for a pastor? And I think the answer a lot of churches have arrived at, and also MCC has arrived at now, is with some sort of Sabbath. And typically it looks like what Jeremy is about to do. Sabbatical is some sort of extended time away, right? It varies a little bit in how long, but it's a chance to stop the job for a little while and be free from it in some sense. I want to do my best. Like, I'm new to being a pastor, right? So I want to do my best to try to explain from my perspective, and I think from Jeremy's and from a lot of perspectives of pastors, maybe why this is a good answer for how the principle of Sabbath can be translated into the modern life of the church. From what I've realized, you get a chance to take a sabbatical as a pastor, right? We try to do that, each of us. Jeremy's normally Mondays off. I'm normally Fridays off. So we try to take that day where we just take a break. We stop and breathe. But something I've noticed with being a pastor is it's such a life calling, right? It's something you're called to all the time that it can be hard to totally shut it off, right? I think God calls you, and he calls your heart to a people. And for me, at least, it's been more than a job. And also practical things arise in the life of a pastor, I've noticed. Sometimes the day off just can't happen because the life of the church is an ebb and flow, right? And some weeks I could probably take 2 days off, and I have. And other weeks it's like there's no chance because things are happening in the lives of people. So I think that's one reason why this idea of sabbatical makes sense for this context. As I mentioned, it's hard if you just have one day off as a pastor. I've noticed to let your mind be free of the cares and the worries for the people who are in your church, because I think they're placed on your heart. And again, I feel like I'm painting it as a bad picture. I'm not. I think Jeremy experienced a call to this, and I did too, and there are so many joys that come along with it, and it's really good, but it's not a light thing. I think it's a heavy responsibility, and that's why there's a calling to it. Another thing I've noticed that's kind of interesting is when we talk about Sabbath, we often talk about stepping away from our jobs and from work, and that's been difficult for me because it's like, okay, so who's my boss? Like, I guess God is my boss, right? What's my job? In some ways, my job is to have a relationship with Christ that I can model to other people, and I can show them, like, this is what I'm doing, and this is how I feel like we're called to do this. So it can be hard for me, and I think for a lot of pastors, to take that separation from work. And wrapped up in that, I think it can be hard at times, especially after years of walking with the Lord, with the mindset of pastoring a people and walking with the people. It can be hard to take time with God that has nothing to do with your church. To take time with God and say, this is just me and you now. This is just about me as a child of God, and it doesn't have something to do with the church. And again, some of that I think is good, because I think a lot of my time with God, it results in something that I can then pass on to people, and I see fruit come from that. But there is a little bit of a sense where it's like, sometimes I just, I need that time with God that isn't that, right? But it can be challenging. And again, this is my experience. I'm speaking here, but I think it's true to what Jeremy would experience as well, as I've noticed in conversations that we've had. And I also think it's just statistically true that a lot of pastors are experiencing this. It's statistically true that a lot of pastors are experiencing this, and it doesn't lead to great things either. I don't know if it's true for you, but I personally have heard a lot of stories of pastors who've found themselves in a pretty bad way. I don't know if anyone else here has ever seen that or heard of that. I got a couple statistics that I thought were interesting from a study that was done with pastors. They said that on average, seminary-trained pastors only last 5 years in church ministry. And I thought, I'm like, wow, like 5 years. That's so little. I think you probably hit your prime in like 15 years, right? Like that's when you become like full of that wisdom. At least that's what I'm hoping for. I hope when I hit that point, I'm just, oh yeah, I get it now. Yeah. Another statistic that I thought was interesting is they polled 1,050 both Reformed and evangelical pastors, and And each one, 100% of them, said that they had a colleague, a close colleague, who had left the ministry because of burnout or a church conflict or moral failure. So that tells me, right, this isn't just my experience and Jeremy's experience, right? In the modern church, the way that we do church together now, there is this problem, if you want to call it that. I think maybe rather than a problem, I would just call it a reality. There's this reality that causes us to be creative in the ways that we find times to stop and breathe. And I think the modern solution that we've come up with, something that seems to work well for pastors, is this time away, this extended time away, because it allows them to say, you know what, right now I'm not a pastor just for these few months. I've had a few weeks to be able to let my mind be free from some of the cares that were originally on it. And right now I'm just a child of God. And just to have a couple of months where you just experience God in that way again. It's like, this isn't for others, this is just for me and you. And I think that comes back and leads to so much health. And additionally, it leads to the thing I was talking about, right? The same as a field. You can produce better fruit if you rest. I think we've found that the sabbatical can lead to a pastor coming back refreshed and feeling ready to be, like I said, empathetic and caring and fun and passionate, right? I don't mean to put too many expectations on it, of course.
Right.
I'm just trying to explain the idea of it all.
Yeah.
So I thought also I would ask Jeremy, like, what specifically is the Sabbath going to look, or the sabbatical going to look like for you?
Yeah, so I will explain that. First, I want to kind of give my experience with sabbatical, because the closest experience I have had to sabbatical was walking with my friend Bill Ludwig through his a few years ago. Many of you were here for my ordination, and Bill spoke at that. Well, Bill took a sabbatical, I don't know, it's probably 4 years ago now. And he asked me to be part of his sabbatical team, which was like 3 or 4 guys who checked in with him regularly, who talked to him on the phone, who had like a group Skype call about once a month. And so I got to see up close what sabbatical did in his life. And he came back a changed person. And I started thinking at that time, man, I think I'd like that. And then a couple years ago at denominational conference, there was a workshop on burnout. And so I went to that, and they gave out a handout, and I went, check, 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 check. And one of the things they said was, burnout is best dealt with by regular sabbaticals. There's this compassion fatigue that just sets in. You're a human being, you're giving. I thought of it kind of like a balloon. You know, imagine a balloon with a slow leak in it, and you blow it up, and it's kind of deflating a little bit, and you blow it up again, and it's deflating a little bit, and you blow it up again, and it just keeps deflating, deflating, deflating. And that is sometimes what it feels like in ministry, and the idea of a sabbatical is just to blow it up, not blow it up, but to, inflate it, to breathe into it again, to bring it back to where it was to begin with. And the idea is not that like, oh, Jeremy's made a lot of mistakes, and if he was a real Christian, then he could just stay inflated all the time. But the reality that as a human being, and most pastors are human beings, that this is just a natural rhythm of work and rest. So anyway, let me talk a little bit about what I want to do. Because the first thing is this idea of stopping, okay? Stopping for me, first of all, means a break from the tasks of ministry. The tasks of ministry, like, the administrative stuff I do, the coffees, the leading, all that sort of stuff, and the preaching. I love to preach. I think it's just one of my favorite things about my job. I love writing sermons. I love delivering them. It just feels like it's in my natural kind of where I'm thriving. But it is tiring every week to come in here and try to have something brilliant and unique, and I don't recycle sermons. I don't pull out one from 10 years ago because I didn't have time. Every week I'm going to God and saying, God, what do you want me to talk about? The brilliant and unique part was supposed to be a little bit of a joke, but the fact that you didn't laugh makes me feel good. I like that. So So preaching is something that, wow, a 3-month break from that, as much as I love it, I feel like I'm going to come back ready to go again. But more than any of the tasks of ministry, it really is about the role. That being a pastor is a different sort of calling. And if you want proof of this, here's what I'd like you to do right now. Put the word pastor in front of your name and see how it feels. Okay? How does it feel? Kind of weird, doesn't it? And maybe if it feels great, then talk to us. Maybe you're being called into ministry. Maybe not, because I think even being called into ministry, it can feel a little weird. Because there's a certain expectation in the church of pastors, there's a certain expectation in society of pastors, and there's a certain expectation that you can place on yourself. And so just having that role is kind of weird and something I've always wrestled with, honestly. But I do believe it's my calling, and what that means is that I do see myself as your pastor. Now, that means that every one of you here, if you're part of MCC, you have a special place in my heart. Whether you know it or not, I see myself as your pastor. And that's why when a pastor goes on sabbatical, they cut off the relationships. Because as long as you're part of MCC, there's a part of me, even if you're a great friend of mine, even if I love you dearly, even though being around you is life-giving, which it is for all of you, by the way. All those things are true. I still see myself as your pastor, and I need a break from that. I carry you in my heart the way a pastor does, and I need to set that down. It's like I've been carrying this backpack, and I need to set it down. And so the fact that I'm going to be unavailable, that you're not going to be able to text me or email me or phone me, if for some reason there's some absolute enormous need for me, you'll be able to get a hold of me through Peter, through April. But in general, I am cutting myself off, and it has nothing to do with you or the fact that I don't love you or like you, and has everything to do with the fact that I do love you and like you, but need a break from my role as pastor. So that really is all about the stopping on sabbatical. It's stopping being a pastor, and like Peter said, just remembering what it means to go to God and not have to say, and what am I going to preach about this week? Or, and please help the meeting, or what about this church decision, or what, just relating to God. Now, the other question is, how do I breathe? How do I fill myself again? How do I bring life into me and heal some of the burnout and get rejuvenated? Like the guy said yesterday at the conference, he talked about getting a fresh burden for what God is doing in the world. How do I do those things? Well, there's going to be a lot of different things. So here's practically some of the things that I'm going to do. Of course, my number one priority in the sabbatical is not to have fun, have a good time, go on vacation, though those things are part of it, but it is to reconnect with God. And so I will spend lots of time on my own reconnecting with God in the ways that I know how to do. So my plan is to read through the Bible again. I haven't done that in a while. My plan is to read some books that talk about our relationship with God, spirituality, not about church leadership, not about that sort of stuff. My plan is to spend lots of time in nature because that's where I connect with God best. Perhaps not in the next couple weeks up here during bug season because I connect with something else during bug season. But to go canoeing, kayaking, hiking, that sort of stuff. April and I have a ministry renewal retreat booked because this is a thing right across the board here. Lots of pastors deal with this. And so Focus on the Family has 2 retreat centers in Canada that just specialize in having pastors and their wives in for a week and leading them through this rejuvenation renewal process. And so we're going to that in July. In August, I have an 8-day silent retreat at a Jesuit monastery/retreat house in Guelph that I'm excited about, just to spend time praying and reflecting. We're going to do some fun family trips. We are going to do some vacationing type stuff. We're going to visit other churches. And so if you think this is a great time to go church shopping, just watch for our license plate in the parking lot, because I'll know. And I'll tell Peter. Anyway, Right off the bat, I'm getting out of town. So the sabbatical starts tomorrow, and on Tuesday, I'm flying to Arizona to visit my friend John in Phoenix, and we're going to hike the Grand Canyon and just have fun. We're going to a place called Top Golf. I don't even know what that is, but he says I'll like it. Yeah. And I do have a team of 5 guys who are going to walk through this process with me. Some from far away, a couple here locally, who are just going to check in with me regularly and walk the journey and make sure that I'm not like depressed on the floor somewhere, and make sure that I'm pursuing the goals that I've kind of set out, and just reflect back for me what they see God doing. And so that's kind of what it's going to be like for me to stop and breathe. I have tried to resist the temptation to put all those expectations on it, that I'm going to come back a spiritual giant and so full that it's going to be amazing. I would like that. But there's another sort of pressure that can come with that. But this is kind of how I sketched it out. So, still, I have that note there, still me. Yeah. So one of the things
That's great. Tell us more.
Yeah. Well, Peter, if you order now. As I was researching retreat centers, I contacted Gary Deal, who's a guy at our national office who had come up here to work with us through some things, and one of his recommendations had been that I go on sabbatical. And so I contacted him to see if he knew of any retreat places, and he wasn't very helpful in that area. But he did say this that really caught my attention. He said, "Oh, that's wonderful that you're going on sabbatical. I hope the church is taking a sabbatical too." And I thought, oh. Well, that's the opposite that the other guy that we talked to told us to do. He said, make sure the church goes on as normal so that the people have to kind of pick up the things that you normally do. And I thought, oh, okay, that's what you're supposed to do. But the truth is, I don't think that's where our church is at, because I'm not doing very much lately. So you guys are already doing the work of the ministry, and Peter, and so I don't think our church needs to learn to pick up the stuff I normally do, because that's already happened. I think what our church needs is a rest. And so when Gary said that, it really spoke to me as like, ooh, maybe this is from God. And so we have been talking about what that might mean and praying about what that might mean with leadership team, ministry team. We talked to you guys about it a few weeks ago. So Peter's going to talk now about what it means for the church to have a sabbatical, to practice the principles of stopping and breathing, even while I do that.
Yeah, so in thinking about what that would look like for us as a church, what summer would look like for us as a church, we had a lot of prayer and discussion, and we kind of came up with 2 things. And I talked about this a bit the last time we had a conversation about this, the things, the ideas of finding rest together and finding connection together. And so that's what we've thought would be good for us to do this summer. And this is not everyone's, What that means for us is that we're going to be stepping away from church in the park. And that's not everyone's first reaction to that isn't necessarily positive. And I know that. But I want to just assure you and assure everyone here that I really do feel like that God is calling us to this. He's calling us to find a rest together. He's calling us to experience some sort of Sabbath together. And I think that the benefits from doing such things are going to be the benefits that we find anytime we find rest, anytime we find Sabbath. It's going to be a chance to remember who we are as God's people, as his children, without anything that we're trying to produce or trying to do. I think it's going to be a chance for us to be revitalized, to be refreshed, so that when we move on to the purpose that we know God has called us for, we can do it in a bigger and better way. One thing that we've said and we want to make clear is that this doesn't mean church in the park is never going to happen again. It probably is going to be right back on next year. We haven't prayed over it, so we don't know exactly, but that is what we're planning at this point, to be moving on to that. But since we're stepping away from it this year, what we're going to do is we're going to be back here at the church. And automatically what that does is it gives rest for worship team volunteers, for all the people who gave a lot of time to set up everything in the park. And again, that was so good, but it was a lot of work. And being back here just automatically gives so much rest for so many of our volunteers that work really, really hard. We're also going to just try to simplify the service, to add more of that in, to make the services less produced in a way. So again, the volunteers have less to worry about, less work to feel like they're doing, and more time to just embrace time together and connection. The services will look like a a little bit more discussion, a little bit more prayer time, more time for testimony. We want it to be a little bit experimental, a little bit flexible. Those are kind of the words we're using. We just want to explore some things together. And something else I'm excited about is after church, we're just going to have times where we can connect together. One week we want to do a barbecue. One week we want to do a hike together. We also want to do a service project together one week. And again, the idea with this is these are laid back things. These are things that are not highly produced, but are things that can facilitate rest and connection together, and a chance to stop and breathe together as a church so that when the fall comes, we can move forward in our mission again together in a bigger and better way. Sorry, I write notes, but sometimes I just don't use them. So if you want more information about this, I've written a letter that kind of outlines exactly what our plans are for the summer. You can also contact me directly if you want to have a conversation about what any of this looks like on any level. I can let you know the thought process that's got us here and what our plans are. Also, if you have any interest in being involved in that, as I said, we're not trying to emphasize a lot of work, but there's going to be things to do. If you're like, you know what sounds fun to me, helping plan some of these things after church or being a part of that, come find me as well. Jeremy and I also made like a little very low budget video talking about this. So if you're more of a digital person, you can check that out, and it kind of talks about where we've ended up for the summer. If you'd like rather not just read through the letter. We're also going to be sending it out digitally. So if you're signed up for the newsletter, you'll be getting it anyway. But if you do want a hard copy, there's a stack of them back there by the water pitcher. And like I said, yeah, I'm available to talk through any of this with anybody if they're willing.
So I just want to end with a challenge for you to take these principles and think about how you want to put them into practice in your own life. And if you're resistant, if you're the kind of person who's, I can't take a day off, and why would I even want to? I get more done without a day off. Okay. But examine that in you. What is it that makes it hard for you to stop and rest? Is it a sense that you need to be in control? Is it a sense that your value and worth is wrapped up in what you can accomplish? Because I think that there's a lot of lies that are fed to us in this area, and practicing Sabbath is a way of embracing the truth of our humanity, of our dignity as children of God. So my challenge to you is not only think about how I'm doing it, how the church is doing it, how are you going to do this in your life? Work and rest, stopping and breathing, these are rhythms that work into the very nature of things. So now we want to end with the time of prayer, but it is super late. So first I want to pray for you guys and pray for Peter, and then I think you're going to return the favor.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Let's pray. God, I thank you for this church that you have called me to, and these people that you have made me pastor for, and what that means and what a privilege that is, and the way that you have strengthened and led me along and empowered me to do the best I can. It really is a great privilege. I also thank you for the privilege of rest. And so right now, as I prepare to go on sabbatical, my prayer is for every person here and every person who belongs to MCC and all the new people that you're going to bring in while I'm gone, that you would meet them in amazing and powerful ways. I want to officially recognize that this church does not depend on me, and I want to turn it all over into your hands. I know you'll take care of everyone. I know you'll provide them everything they need. And I'm just grateful for the part that I get to play, and also that it doesn't all depend on me. It all depends on Peter. No, I'm just kidding. It depends on you, but I also recognize that I'm leaving Peter carrying a greater share of the burden, and I pray that you would strengthen and empower him. Give him wisdom as you already do beyond his years. Give him emotional energy. Give him everything he needs. And not only that, but may this summer be a time of rest and refreshment and stopping and breathing for him and for Kara as well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So yeah, sorry for taking so much of your time. What we want to do is just quickly take a chance to pray for Jeremy and his family, if you guys want to come up as well.
Where you want us.
What's that? Come on up, Aiden. Ella's back in Adventureland, so pretend that she is here and pray for her also. I'm just going to lay my hand on Jeremy, and if you guys could just enter into prayer, a time of prayer here with me, I just want to send them off with a blessing from us as a church. Dear Jesus, I thank you so much for the work that you're doing at MCC, Lord, and I thank you so much for the work that you've done through Jeremy and through his family in this church and in this community, God. As a church, we desire for this sabbatical to be a time of blessing, for this sabbatical to be a wonderful and deep time of breathing and of refreshing, God. I pray that you would make it possible for Jeremy to stop, God. That you would give him some freedom, Lord, during this time. That you would meet with him in such a real and powerful way, God. We just pray for that above all things, that you would meet with Jeremy and his entire family in a very real way this summer, God. That you would encounter them in each new day, that you would show them new depths to you, God. New exciting parts of who you are and how you want to be. They're everything for them, God. I just want to pray a prayer of thanks to you, God, as well. We just thank you for what Jeremy and for what his family have done for the church here. And we also just want to thank you that you have called us to rest, that you set an example out from the very beginning, from the very creation, that rest is a part of life, that there's a cycle of work and rest, and we are to engage in it if we want to be the best version of what you've created us to be, God. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for the chance that we have to set Jeremy off on that path of Sabbath and that path of sabbatical, God. Help us to always keep our eyes and our hearts and our minds turned toward you this summer while he's away. I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. We also have a little gift for you, Jeremy. Kathy's going to bring it up.
And by the way, if you think it took a long time, just think of it as you got 2 sermons today, and so then it wasn't so long.
So this is just a packet of letters from some people on leadership team and ministry team that just kind of share their thankfulness and their love for you. So just hope you can read those over the next little time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, go in peace.
All right. Have a great week. And you can hug me on the way out if you want.